Hello, my darling. It's Evelyn here. And let me tell you, nothing can prepare your heart for the moment you hear the dead calling through the living. It happened on a Monday of all days. The quiet sort of Monday, when even the dust in the sunlight seems too tired to float. I was folding laundry, my son Thomas's shirts, left behind from his last visit, still smelling faintly of his cologne, when I heard the phone ring in the next room. But it wasn't mine. It was Iris's. She and Thomas had stopped by for an impromptu dinner, something she insisted upon lately, always with a suspicious tone of politeness. She left her purse in the hallway, as she often did, as if my home were just an extension of her own carefully curated life. I thought nothing of it. I was slicing cucumbers, humming some old tune from the radio, when I heard her ringtone. That soft, eerie chime that always reminded me of wind through an empty chapel. And then the impossible happened. I didn't mean to look. Truly, I didn't. But the screen was facing up. It lit the hall like a lighthouse in a storm. Incoming call. Michael. Heart emoji. My knees nearly gave out. Michael. My husband. Michael, who had died in his sleep 6 years ago, on a crisp October morning with sunlight on his face. Michael, whose ashes were scattered over Lake Watery, as per his wishes, beneath that old oak tree we used to sit under with sandwiches and wine. Michael, calling Iris. My first thought was cruelly rational. A prank, a recycled number, a coincidence. Surely someone else now had his number, and she simply hadn't updated her contacts. But then I saw it. The photo. The one she'd chosen for him. It wasn't a stock photo or a stranger's face. It was him. The same photo I'd kept in my locket for years. Him in his navy sweater, leaning against the railing of our old porch, smile crooked from the wind. She had it saved under his name, with a heart. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. My mind screamed and whispered at the same time. And then she answered. She didn't see me standing there in the hallway's shadow, didn't notice me freeze halfway between the kitchen and the stairs. She lifted the phone to her ear, turned slightly away, and in a low voice, low and tender and unbearably familiar, she said, "Hey, baby. You shouldn't be calling now. I told you. Mondays are risky." The next sound I made wasn't quite a gasp and not quite a sob. It was the kind of noise that lives in the deepest parts of you, the ones that only come out when reality breaks its own rules. She turned, saw me, and for a flicker of a second, something in her face fractured. Then, faster than I thought she was capable of, she smiled. "Oh, Evelyn," she said, slipping the phone into her pocket with practiced ease. "I didn't see you there." No apology, no explanation, just a blade of a smile, sharp as glass. I couldn't speak. I just stood there, shaking, the word Michael still glowing in my brain like fire. That night, I barely touched my dinner. Thomas chattered on about some project at work, oblivious. Iris, for once, was quiet. Watching me, though. Every so often, our eyes would meet, and she'd give me that same glossy, controlled smile, like a stewardess lying about turbulence. I didn't sleep. I sat in my chair, the one by the fireplace, holding the locket in one hand and a cup of untouched tea in the other. I stared at the darkness, listening for ghosts, wondering which parts of my past were real and which parts were scripted. Because, darling, if Michael was calling Iris, then I didn't just lose a husband, I was losing the truth. And I knew, right then and there, I couldn't let that phone call slip into silence. Not this time, not again. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I put on lipstick, not because I had anywhere to go, not because I had anyone to impress, but because I needed to look like a woman who could still open locked doors, literal or otherwise. It was a deep plum shade, the kind Michael used to call trouble on your lips. I remember the way he'd grin at me from across the kitchen table when I wore it, like I was a mystery he was lucky enough to live beside. I hadn't touched that color since the funeral, but today I wore it like armor. Iris and Thomas had left early, as they always did. She had an appointment. He had a call. Their excuses rolled off the tongue like butter. I stood at the window and watched them pull away, her in that sleek little silver SUV, the one I helped them afford when they just needed a bit of help getting started. I remembered the thank you card. 3 lines. Not a word of it felt like gratitude. As soon as they turned the corner, I went straight to the hall table. Her phone wasn't there. Of course it wasn't. She wasn't foolish enough to leave it behind. She'd learned to be careful, but she hadn't counted on one thing. She'd left her coat, and in her coat pocket was a second phone. Not her usual phone, the rose gold iPhone she carried everywhere like a badge. No, this one was matte black, scuffed around the edges. It buzzed softly in my hand as I pulled it free, like a sleeping animal startled awake. No lock screen, no fingerprint, just a simple swipe. And there he was, Michael, first in the list of contacts, starred, marked as emergency only, a label that somehow made my blood run cold. I didn't call. Not then. My fingers were shaking too much and I didn't trust myself to speak. But I did open the text history. There were dozens, months worth. December 12th, 7:42 p.m. I told you not to leave that paper out. She saw the handwriting. January 3rd, 2:17 a.m. You were right about the insurance. I found the policy in her sewing drawer. February 14th, 9:09 a.m. You still remember Valentine's Day. She never did. That one stopped me cold. Because I did remember Valentine's Day. Every year. A little card tucked in his shaving kit. A cherry pie if I had the strength to bake one. I remembered all of it. But apparently, he thought otherwise. Or someone pretending to be him did. I scrolled further, heart pounding, until I found something I hadn't expected. A photo, blurry, taken from across the street, of me, outside my garden gate, carrying a basket of rosemary, and below it, she still walks the same. My knees gave out. I sank to the bench in the hallway, phone clenched in my hand like a stone. The room spun slightly. The scent of the rosemary came back to me, sharp and earthy and suddenly wrong, like something holy had been violated. Because whoever was on the other end of these messages knew me, knew how I walked, knew how I loved, knew what I kept in my drawers. But Michael was dead. I'd sat beside his hospice bed. I'd held his hand when the morphine dulled his voice. I'd washed his face with a cool cloth while he drifted in and out of breath. I buried him, and still. The texts kept coming. The last one, just 5 days ago. She's suspicious. I felt it last night. It hit me like a slap. That dinner, the call, her smile, she knew. She saw it in my face. She felt the ground shift. And now I was holding proof, or madness, in my hand. That evening, I returned the phone to her coat pocket. I didn't delete anything. I didn't need to. Whatever game Iris was playing, she was already 2 steps ahead. But I took something else. From the coat's inside lining, a slip of folded paper. Tucked so carefully it was clear she hadn't meant to forget it. It was a receipt. From a printing shop on Valley Avenue, dated just last week. 1-page photo print. From USB. Image name, Michael_last_will.jpg. I stared at it for a long time, the ink smudging slightly under my thumb. I remembered the lawyer's office, the neatly typed will, the clean closure. But I had never seen a photo version, and never on Iris's USB. Was this it then? Were they hiding something from me? Changing documents? Twisting the past? Was Michael still alive in some way? Or had he left something behind? A recording, a confession, a secret Iris had no right to own? The questions burned like acid, and somewhere deep in my gut, I felt the cold press of betrayal. Whatever truth lay ahead, I was going to find it, even if it meant waking the dead. It was Thomas's voice that finally unraveled everything, not his usual voice, not the one he used when calling to check in, always distracted, always polite. No, this was different. It came from behind a door I wasn't supposed to open. The den. Michael's den. For 6 years, it had been mine again. After his death, I'd turned it into a reading room, put my sewing machine in the corner. But there were still things that were his in there. Books he loved, his old leather recliner with the arms worn down smooth, and a locked cabinet I never had the heart to empty. I was in the hallway dusting when I heard it. A voice, low and indistinct, muffled behind the door. I thought at first it was the radio. Maybe I'd left it on again, forgetful as I was these days. But then I heard the second voice. Iris. Sharp, measured, that perfect knife-edged calm. My stomach dropped. They were in my house, and they hadn't told me. I moved slowly, quietly, the way you do when your body already knows something your mind isn't ready to hear. I pressed my ear to the wood, and there, as clear as if he'd been standing beside me, came my son's voice. You said she'd signed it? You said you handled it? I couldn't breathe. Iris replied, her tone clipped. She's old, Thomas. She forgets things. You think they'll question a woman her age if she says she never signed something? It's a blessing she hasn't already started digging. There was a long silence. Then Thomas again, quieter this time, almost unsure. Still, it doesn't feel right. I mean, it's her house. Another silence. Then Iris laughed, not loudly, just a short, joyless chuckle. Not if the documents say otherwise. My hand shot to the doorknob, instinctive, rage boiling up behind my ribs. But it was locked. Of course it was locked. They knew me too well, or thought they did. I stepped back, heart pounding. They were talking about the house, about my house. I had lived there for 43 years. Michael and I built our life there, raised Thomas under that roof, planted fruit trees in the backyard. I had spent my 60s fixing gutters and painting shutters and staying out of their way. And now they were taking it. I waited until I heard them leave. The front door clicked, soft and smug. I counted to 100 before moving again, straight to the cabinet. I had kept the key in my jewelry box all these years. Michael always said that cabinet wasn't for me. Too many boring documents, he'd say. But after he passed, I used it to store old files, papers, mementos. And that day, it held a folder I hadn't seen before. Bright red, too new. Inside, a copy of a deed transfer, stamped, notarized, dated just 2 months ago, from Evelyn Grace Holbrook to Thomas M. Holbrook and Iris L. Holbrook. I staggered back, the room tilting, my name, my signature, except it wasn't mine. I know my own hand. I know the slight loop in the Y, the way my K tilts just a bit to the left. This wasn't it. This was a forgery. A cold sweat broke across my neck. My mouth went dry. I flipped through the folder with trembling fingers. There were other documents. A will revision I had never seen, naming Thomas as primary executor, Iris as co-executor. Language about capacity, about long-term health oversight. I felt like the air had been sucked from the room. I wasn't just being pushed aside. I was being erased, one signature at a time. And that's when the memory hit me, a small, almost forgettable moment, weeks ago. Iris had offered me tea, something she never did. She said she wanted to talk, brought it to me with that too sweet smile, sat across from me as I drank it. I had felt dizzy that night, fuzzy, thought it was just age. But what if it wasn't? What if she had? I dropped the folder. My knees gave out. I sat hard on the floor, carpet rough against my palms. It all made sense now. The calls from Michael, the forged will, the conversations behind locked doors. This wasn't just deception. It was a theft of me, of my memories, my home, my past, and I was the only one who knew the truth. But darling, they didn't know everything. They didn't know I had already been watching them, that I had my own folder, tucked away in a sewing tin in the back of my closet. And I knew, the moment I picked myself up off that floor, there was no going back. Whatever they thought they were building, I was about to knock it down, brick by bloody brick. The morning I walked into the records office downtown, I could feel every line in my face deepen. Every step was slow but certain. I was done playing the aging widow. I was Evelyn Grace Holbrook, and someone had tried to rob me of more than my home. They had tried to steal my memory, my dignity, my very self. The young clerk at the desk barely glanced up when I approached, until I placed the red folder on the counter. "I'd like to verify the authenticity of these documents," I said, voice steady. "Particularly the signature on this deed transfer. It claims to be mine." That got his attention. He looked up, blinked once, then twice. "Of course, ma'am. We can have our notary review this." It didn't take long. The notary, a woman with short gray hair and kind, sharp eyes, brought the folder back after 15 minutes. She didn't hand it to me. She sat down across the table in the small glass-walled conference room and said carefully, "This signature is problematic." I already knew. It matches none of the verified examples we have on file, and the ID number used for the witnessing, it belongs to someone who no longer works in the county, retired 5 years ago. So it was fake, not just a betrayal, not just a trick, a crime. "Would you like to file a report?" she asked gently. I looked at her hands, clean, strong, rested lightly on the papers. She didn't pity me. That was important. "I would," I said, "and I'd like a certified copy of everything." I left the building with a folder of my own, stamped, signed, legitimate. On the way home, I stopped by my old friend Blythe's house. She was the only one I trusted. We'd been friends since our nursing days, back when I still wore scrubs and knew how to wrap a broken bone better than most young doctors now. She took one look at my face, poured us 2 cups of coffee, and sat me down. "Iris," she muttered after I told her everything. "That woman's got ambition tattooed behind her eyelids." She was the first to say what I had only just begun to admit to myself. "They were planning to put you away, sell the house out from under you, call it early onset something or other, say you didn't know what year it was. That tea you mentioned? That wasn't kindness, Evelyn." I nodded slowly. "I know. You could take this to the police right now." "I will," I said. "But first, I want them to know that I know." I wanted to see their faces when the foundation cracked, so I waited. I waited until Friday evening, when Iris always brought me that same ridiculous organic casserole and her overly bright chatter. Thomas never came anymore. Said he was too busy, but I knew better. I was a ghost in his eyes now, just a signature they needed, a voice they hoped would eventually go silent. But that Friday, I greeted her at the door with tea already poured. My, she said, slipping off her heels and stepping into my kitchen. "You've set the table. How sweet." "I thought we could talk," I replied, placing her cup in front of her. "Oh?" "There's something I found in your coat pocket," I said, watching her face carefully. Her eyes flickered, just for a second. That practiced calm wavered. "I must have left some receipts." "No, not a receipt," I said, voice flat. "A phone." She froze. "Iris, how is it that my dead husband's number is calling you?" She blinked slowly, then she smiled. But it wasn't her usual smile. This one was darker, crueler. "I wondered how long it would take," she said, lifting her cup but not drinking. "You always did like to pretend you were sharper than you are." I didn't respond. She leaned back in her chair, almost amused. "Michael made a mess of things. He didn't prepare well. No updated will, no deed transfer, no clarity. That left opportunities." My stomach churned. "You were never supposed to see that phone," she continued, eyes glittering. "It was just to manage appearances, keep up the idea of his presence. Thomas believed it helped you grieve. I let him believe that." "That's not what it was," I said coldly. She tilted her head. "No, it wasn't." She knew I had seen the texts, and she didn't care. "The house was always going to be ours eventually," she said. "You just insisted on living forever. But then, well, we had a moment of clarity. You forged my name. We gave you a story," she corrected. "Something comforting, a phantom to whisper to at night. Honestly, you should be thanking me. It was gentle. The rage in me was a slow, seething boil. Not loud, not fiery, just pure, white-hot resolve. I was going to let you live out your days here, she said. We'd have made sure you were cared for. But now? She stood, smoothed her dress. You've made things difficult. I stood too. I made some tea, I said. Real tea. You didn't touch yours. She glanced down at it, then back at me. I don't drink anything I haven't made myself. Smart girl, but not smart enough. Because what she didn't know was that the documents were already filed, that I had seen a lawyer that morning, that I had reported the forgery, that by Monday a warrant would be issued. She walked out of my kitchen, cool as silk. I'll tell Thomas you're not feeling well, she said lightly. It'll be better for everyone. And as she stepped into the night, I whispered just loud enough for her to hear. You should start packing, Iris. She didn't turn around, but she heard me. And the door clicked shut like the final page of a very old book. I didn't hear from Thomas for 4 weeks. Not a text, not a call, not even a knock on the door. But somehow, that silence didn't ache the way I thought it would. It didn't echo, it didn't haunt, it simply settled, like dust on an unopened book. The court case moved quickly once the evidence was presented. The forgery was undeniable. The notary statements, the footage, the discrepancies in the signatures, even the ridiculous Michael text logs, all laid bare under fluorescent lights and quiet oaths. Iris never showed her face in court. Her attorney claimed emotional distress, but I knew better. She wasn't grieving. She was hiding. She had built her story like a fortress, and I'd found the one crack she never thought I'd dare crawl through. The ruling came down on a rainy Thursday morning. The deed was returned to my name. The forged will invalidated. Charges filed against Iris for fraud, coercion, and attempted elder exploitation. The judge, a woman not much younger than me, with tired but steady eyes, looked at me when it was over and simply said, Mrs. Holbrook, I hope your peace returns. And I realized, as I stood there in that courtroom with hands that didn't shake, that it already had. It came back the moment I stopped waiting for someone else to protect what was mine. Thomas came back on a Sunday. No announcement, just him, standing on my porch, a paper bag in his arms, and a look on his face like someone carrying the weight of his own name for the first time. I made soup, he said, awkward. I held the door open. We ate in silence for a while. The broth was too salty, the carrots too soft, but I ate every spoonful, because it wasn't about the soup. It was about what he hadn't said yet. Iris left, he finally said, packed everything, took the car, emptied our joint account. I nodded. I signed a statement, he added. For the DA, admitted my part, told the truth. That was the right thing, I said softly. I almost didn't. But you did. He looked at me, tears brimming. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me. I don't need to forgive you to love you, Thomas, I said. But you'll need to live with what you did. That's the part I can't do for you. He nodded, the silence between us heavy but honest. As he stood to leave, he hesitated. Can I come next Sunday? Maybe bring the kids? I reached for his empty bowl. Yes, but no more store-bought casseroles. I want real food next time. He smiled, small, wounded, real. The door closed behind him, and I stood there for a long time, listening to the quiet. Not lonely, not empty, just still. In the weeks that followed, I planted herbs again, cleaned out Michael's old desk, donated the chair. I kept one drawer, the one with our old photo albums, his letters from the road, the ticket stub from our first movie date. Those were mine, not because they proved anything, but because they felt like mine. Iris had once tried to call, just once. Her number came up, and I let it ring. I didn't answer, because some truths don't need to be spoken. Some women, once they've survived the fire, don't go back to touch the ash. I sat on my porch that evening with a cup of chamomile, watching the sky streak itself pink and lavender. My home, my breath, my bones, all mine again. And I thought about something I wish someone had told me when I was younger. It's not selfish to protect your peace. It's not cruel to draw a line. And it's never, ever too late to stop being erased. Even when the call comes from the dead. Even when the betrayal wears the face of someone you once cradled in your arms. Darling, if you're reading this and something inside you is whispering that things aren't right, that someone is writing over your name in your own story, listen to that voice. She is not weak. She is not crazy. She is you. And you deserve to live in the center of your life, not as a footnote. Come home to yourself. The key is still in your hand. You just have to turn the lock.